Hello everyone, I really hope you're all doing well today. It is ridiculously warm here today. I just checked the thermostat in this room before filming this video and it's currently at 32 degrees Celsius, which is just insane. We don't have aircon fitted in our homes over here, so it's a bit of a struggle. I've just taken a towel out of the freezer for Yoli to lie on. We're just really not equipped to deal with this heat over here. But one plant that is definitely not complaining in this heat is the Alocasia Regal shield, and this one is a tropical plant and is doing beautifully well in these tropical conditions we're having. I've had this plant, I think, just under 2 years at this point, and I got it when it was a teeny tiny thing like that, and I've learned a lot through caring for this plant. There's been lots of trial and error. But knowing what I know now, I would honestly say that it's one of my easiest alocasias. And I know Alocasia as a genus is one that typically a lot of the time is not recommended for beginners. I would say with this type of alocasia, if you know what you're doing and you set it up in the right way, this plant can be grown by anyone. So yeah, hopefully we can demystify some things today, figure out some issues that you might have going on with your Regal shields and set you up for success. But first, if you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Yoli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And yeah, whether you own this plant, are thinking of owning this plant, or just want to learn a little bit more about it, I hope you find this video useful and I hope you enjoy it. Let's get into it. So, as I said at the beginning of this video, the Alocasia Regal shield is absolutely one of my easiest alocasias, and that's partly due to the fact that I've set it up in the right way to grow, and we will get into that in a moment. But also it's due to the fact that this is actually a hybrid alocasia, meaning that it's not just one individual genus. Its two parent plants are the Alocasia odora and the Alocasia black velvet. And if you take a look at those two parent plants and then you look at the foliage of this plant, it's really clear that this one has got a complete mix of characteristics between the two parent plants. It's got a slight, it's not a velvet leaf plant per se, but it has got a slight velvetiness to its leaves, which when it catches the light almost has a slight iridescence, which is so beautiful. But due to the fact that it's half odora, it is capable of getting absolutely huge. This one, it can grow to be a giant. So if you're thinking of getting this plant, I would bear that in mind. It's quick to grow and it's fast to size up. So make sure you've got some space to grow this plant well. And I've said it before about hybrid plants, not even specific to Alocasia as a genus, but across a myriad of genuses. I personally typically find that hybrid plants are just much more resilient and much more hardy. And I think this is due to the fact that they've got obviously two parent plants. They've got kind of a mix of genetics that just help them deal with things in a better way, for want of a better way of putting it. I do just find them typically easier plants to grow. So therefore, as I say, I think this would make a very good beginner plant. But the first thing to think about with this plant, as you do with most plants when you bring them into your home, is light. And this is a tropical plant. And although it's a hybrid, both its parent plants are native to Southeast Asia, meaning that it does like really quite high light. This is an alocasia that is more adaptable than others, let's say. It can tolerate slightly lower levels of light, although I would absolutely not class it as a low light plant. I would say the upper end of kind of medium light is the bare minimum you should be looking at. And if you really want this plant to size up and grow big, the higher the light, the better. The one thing you obviously do need to be very careful about before you just bring home a plant and stick it in direct sunlight is that if a plant isn't used to growing in direct sunlight, even if it's capable of taking that, it probably will require some acclimation so that it doesn't burn. And alocasias do have very kind of soft, delicate foliage that is very susceptible to scorching if you don't do things properly. I've made so many mistakes over the years putting plants in positions where in theory they'll do really well, and long term maybe they will, but I just haven't made that adjustment a gradual process, and I've just put them there too soon. So for example, the room that we're in right now actually right now looks quite dark behind me, just because I'm not running my big grow lights at the moment, and the sun has moved around to the other side of the house now, thank goodness. But this room typically does receive a good level of bright indirect light all day round, and that's pretty standard for most houseplants, to be honest. Whenever you kind of hear about the right thing to do for plants, you'll always hear bright indirect light. And all that really means is just an area where your plant is going to receive lots and lots of natural light throughout the day without getting too much direct sun. This is one that can absolutely take some direct sun, but as I say, if you're going to put it in a sunny spot, just make that a gradual transition. Maybe put it in sun for an hour a day, take it out, then 2 hours a day, move it back to a bright and direct light spot, and just gradually ease it into it, and just monitor your plant really, really carefully over that time. That kind of goes for whenever you move your house plants, whether or not you're bringing home a new plant or you're just moving a plant from one area of your home to another area. Often when their conditions change, they are going to respond in a way that is unpredictable. So although this is an adaptable and hardy alocasia, just keep an eye on it and monitor it for any changes. I always say the best thing to do if you're not quite sure is look at the environment that you got your plant from. For example, if it came from a grow house or a plant shop or something like that. Typically the plants that we buy, at least here in the UK, come from glass houses, and that's where they're kind of started off, and that is lots of humidity, lots of bright light, not necessarily direct sun, but lots of long hours of light. And that's something that I've really noticed with this one. When I increase the hours of its light, then I really see it kick into action. Hence why at this time of year it is growing so quickly. It's just getting ready to give me a new leaf here at the moment, which is really exciting. With every new leaf, it is sizing up so much. But the other thing to bear in mind when it comes to light is just making sure that you're keeping its leaves nice and clean, just because a build-up of dust or dirt will mean that it can't effectively photosynthesize. It can't lap up all the goodness from the sunlight that it's getting, even if you're not growing it in direct sun. So I would just take either a microfiber cloth, a damp sponge, or at the moment I'm doing lots of pest treating, so I just use a damp makeup brush with a bit of horticultural soap, and I'll just give it a wipe over whenever I think of it. And this is an alocasia. I mean, all alocasias are quite susceptible to pests. And actually, yeah, it's this leaf. If you look at the bottom of the leaf, I'll put some clips in so that you can properly see, but you can see it has got quite a bit of pest damage on the bottom of it. And this is because this plant had thrips quite recently. And because it's such a dark leafed plant, I didn't notice it for ages. The thrips just kind of blended in with the foliage and I didn't get to it soon enough. But as I say, I've just been doing lots of treatments with horticultural soap, and that has meant that not only I'm able to keep the leaves lovely and clean, but also free from pests coming back. And this is an alocasia that chases the light quite a lot. And although you might not be able to tell from the angle I'm showing you at, because it's kind of leaning towards the camera at this point, if I rotate the pot, you can see it's actually leaning quite a lot. And that's just because I have not been turning this plant. If you want it to grow really full and kind of more upright, then the best thing that you can do, unless you're lucky enough to have one light source that just comes from above, is rotate your plant on a regular basis, and then it will remain really even in its growth and it won't start to lean too much. And before we get on to watering for this plant, it's important to talk about substrate, because this is an area where I feel like I have just turned a corner with alocasia and I have found a way to grow them really easily. Typically when you get alocasia from a garden centre, a plant shop, when you order them online, they will come in soil or some kind of soil-based mix. And although you can grow alocasia in this way, and obviously in their natural habitat, that is the kind of substrate they'd be growing in, I personally find, I'm going to put some clips in because this is very drippy, but I personally find growing them in semi-hydro is the best way to go about it. It just makes your life so easy. It means that you're at far less risk of overwatering, which I will talk about in a minute. But semi-hydro is basically, I get questions about it all the time. It's basically just kind of a slang word for semi-hydroponics, which is not hydroponic, not fully water growing, but not growing in an organic substrate. So for example, the mix that I'm using here, it looks like that. And it's basically just a mix of pumice, lava rock, and lots of absorbent porous rocks that hold water really, really well, meaning that you can just fill a little reservoir of water at the bottom of the pot and it will essentially wick it up and the plant can just feed off the water that it needs without being completely submerged. Because one of the biggest issues that Alocasia and lots of houseplants, but particularly Alocasia, often face is issues caused by overwatering. And if you are growing this plant in soil and you water it when it's not quite ready for a drink, or you don't let the plant properly drain when you've watered it through, a lot of the time that can mean the roots of your plant start to rot. And with all plants, as I say, that is a bit of a nightmare. It does mean you need to do some major rehabbing. I've made videos on that before, so I'll link them down below. But the dangerous thing with Alocasia is that if that spreads to the base of the plant, which is known as the rhizome, which essentially is just an underground stem that the roots grow from, if it spreads to the rhizome and that starts to rot, there is no bringing your plant back. Unfortunately, you're going to have to just throw that plant away. The plant is doomed. So yeah, I cannot recommend semi-hydroponics enough. Personally, I get mine from Soil Ninja, not sponsored in any way, but I will link them down below. I really like the stuff they use. They do a nice chunky mix, which again is really good for aeration around your plant's roots. And for that reason, because of the substrate I'm using, I actually don't monitor it at all. Just when I notice the reservoir of water is getting a little bit low, I just go ahead and fill that up. However, if you are growing in soil, I would just recommend letting the top layer of your soil dry out, then sticking your finger down into the soil and seeing how damp it feels. If you can feel a lot of moisture still in the soil, I would give it another few days. The biggest killer, and this is something I always say, but the biggest killer in houseplants is overwatering. So check back on your plants in a few days. This one's more drought tolerant than most Alocasias, so give it, as I say, a few days, come back, see how the soil's feeling, and when it's starting to feel a little bit drier, then go ahead and water it again. You do see this plant sold even in its big mature state in soil quite a lot. And as I say, if that's your personal preference, by all means go for it. But if I can give you one piece of advice, it would be get your Alocasias into semi-hydro, just because it's going to make your life so much easier. And they're going to become really low maintenance plants, which is never something that I previously thought I would say about Alocasia. So yeah, top tip if I can give you one right there. Then when it comes to fertilizing your plant, as I say, for pretty much all of my house plants, I will always fertilize them when they are in an active state of growth. And that goes for plants year round. I don't just fertilize at one time of year as opposed to another. I know some people like to kind of give their plants a break through the winter months. Personally, because I do use grow lights and stuff like that in my collection, I'm able to replicate in a lot of areas kind of summer growing conditions as close to their natural habitat as possible year round. Therefore, most of my plants do keep growing year round, and therefore I keep fertilizing them year round. I will just say that if you're growing in a semi-hydroponic system, check the label of your fertilizer and just make sure that that's okay to be used with semi-hydroponics. I know you can get specific fertilizers for semi-hydroponic growing. I personally, I've got it right next to me, use Liquid Gold Leaf. Again, not sponsored, I just love it. I use that for all of my house plants, and I will just dilute that down a little bit more than I would do for my plants in soil, and I use it every single time I water this plant. As I say, the only time that I would stop fertilizing is if my plant goes through a period where it's not giving me any growth at all, purely for the fact that I don't want to stress the plant. If it's kind of conserving its energy and taking a bit of a break from giving me growth, the last thing you want to do is be shoving loads of extra nutrients into its soil and kind of forcing it to grow. That absolutely does not equal healthy growth in the long term, and it can lead to much more serious issues such as fertilizer burn, which actually affects the roots of your plants, but you most commonly notice it first on the foliage, and it often displays as kind of yellowy brown rings, and it looks really, really horrible. It essentially looks just like that, a burn. So yeah, if you're in any doubt, start with a little bit less fertilizer than it might say or suggest on your bottle. Gradually ease your plants into it and just see how they go. And as I say, if your plant stops growing, stop the fertilizer. my camera actually just overheated, so I had to take a moment and let it cool down. I have actually put the grow lights on behind me now so that you can see a little bit more what this room looks like when I have set it up with grow lights. For some reason, these ones seem to have just turned themselves off, and I don't know if maybe they've overheated as well. It is, oh God, it is so hot. But ironically, the next point we're moving on to is temperature for this plant. And as I say, this is one that is absolutely not suffering in this heat. It is just lapping it up because both of the parent plants of this hybrid are native to Southeast Asia, and therefore it is perfectly happy in higher temperatures. I'm not suggesting that you need to try and replicate these temperatures in your own home. That's totally unrealistic. At least it is if you're here in the UK. I will typically try and keep this space here at around about 20 degrees Celsius if I possibly can. And that seems to work, I was going to say work wonders for most of my plants. Again, most of them are quite hardy in the sense they can cope with slight drops in temperature. And this one definitely is. When I was at the flat, there were some times where I was away and the temperature dropped lower than I would have liked it to. And this one never gave me any grief. So I would suggest around about the 20 mark if you can possibly manage that. But so long as it's not dropping any lower than about 14, 15 degrees Celsius, I would say that's absolutely fine. But then moving on to humidity, again, at the moment we're kind of blessed in the sense that it's constantly feeling like it needs to thunder, and therefore the humidity is really high. But this one loves humidity. Alocasia as a genus is such a humidity lover. However, again, this is a type of alocasia that doesn't need extreme levels of humidity in order to stay happy. Again, if you can keep it around about the 50% mark, that would be ideal. That's what I try to do for all of my plants in here. Again, it does drop slightly lower from time to time, and this one I wouldn't worry too much about. But if you do notice brown tips on the leaves, that's a very common sign that it's not getting enough humidity. Again, cracked edges, stuff like that often mean that the plant is kind of battling on in very dry conditions that often you can't really tell if you haven't got a humidifier reading, little thermostat thing. Yeah, so I've got, oh, hello, Yoli. Oh, hello, hot dog. Come through, baby girl. Come through. Oh, what's your tail? Come here. But yeah, I get one off Amazon that tells me the humidity and the temperature in my space just so that I can monitor it a little bit better. I do run a humidifier in this space from time to time when I need it. But again, just if you've got lots of houseplants, actually having them grouped together in an enclosed space, particularly if you're growing lots of them in semi-hydro or propagating lots of them in water, that is naturally gonna raise the humidity anyway, naturally. Things like pebble trays and stuff like that as well are great for the same reason, but as plants transpire, they do release moisture and they essentially kind of act as a humidifier for each other. So yeah, often grouping your plants together can do a lot if you're not able to invest in a humidifier. But then when it comes to propagation for this plant, you can propagate this plant in a couple of different ways. And actually, although I don't have an example as such with this type of alocasia to show you, I have actually brought across some little alocasias that I've got growing in a little jar here, and actually these ones are ready to be potted up. These ones are just little corms that I found in the pot of one of my alocasias when I was repotting it recently. And what you will often find is that if you've had an alocasia in one pot for a year or so, when you do come to repot it, there'll be lots of things that look like little bulbs and they're what's known as corms. And if you do keep them either in a propagation box with something like sphagnum moss, or as I commonly like to do, in a little bit of shallow water covered with a cup, I'll put some clips in because I've got some propagating that way at the moment, then they will start to root, and before you know it, you've got a whole new plant. And sometimes the plant will just actually do that for you. I've had multiple alocasias before that I'll suddenly notice I've got little ones kind of popping up in the soil, and those are corms that have just essentially propagated themselves. And when that happens, you can just very carefully divide them from the mother plants, and then you've got two new plants. So yeah, if you've got any specific questions about anything with this plant, then do drop me a comment down below. I will do my best to help. But I think that's pretty much the gist of it. So yeah, to summarize, semi-hydro, honestly, I'm not selling this stuff. I'm not making any money by talking about it. I just do think it is a game changer with alocasia. Bright and direct light, some direct sun, but build that up gradually over time. Good humidity, good heat. That's the secret to this plant, and that is it. That's it really. So yes, I hope you enjoyed this video and I really hope you found it useful. If you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.
Stay sexy, plant lovers.